What's up guys, welcome to the video tutorial for the learning lad on C++ programming. So in this tutorial we're gonna learn something about the operator overloading. So in a normal programming, when we create the variables, for example let's say integer variables a and b, and this a and b are containing some values, let's say 10 and b equal to 20. So at that time, if you want to do any normal operations like plus or minus or multiplication or division, what you guys need to do is you guys need to write a plus b and a star or a multiply b, like that. But can we do the same thing with the custom objects that we create in our program? The answer is no, we can't. That's because these operators are not defined to work with our customly built objects. So to make this operator to work with our custom built operators, this C++ offers us one of the most powerful feature in programming, which is called operator overloading. So this operator overloading is nothing but making the basic operators available in C++ to work with our custom built objects. So in C++ we can overload most of the operators so that they perform special operations relative to the classes that we create. And when an operator is overloaded, none of its original meanings are lost. Instead, the type of objects it can apply to is expanded, or when we overload these operators in our program, we can use them with these basic types just like the way we were using before, and we can also use them with the objects that we create from the classes. So after overloading the appropriate operators, we can use the objects in expressions in just the same way that we use the C++ built-in data types. So now in C++ to overload the operators, we're gonna create something called operator functions. An operator function defines the operations that the overloaded operator will perform relative to the classes upon which it will work. An operator function is created using the keyword operator, which I'm going to explain while writing that program in this tutorial. And these operator functions can be either members or non-members of a class. If it is a non-member, then that operator function most commonly is the friend function of their class. And the way operator functions are written differs between member and non-member functions, and which we're going to learn in the upcoming tutorials. Alright, let's get started. Let's begin with an example. So here in this tutorial, just to demonstrate the operator overloading or how to overload the operators, we're gonna create a class and let's call it as marks. And this class is gonna have a couple of private properties. And let's say int internal marks, int mark, and then we're gonna say int ext mark or external mark. Alright, the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna define the public access specifier, and also this internal mark and external mark are the private members of this class mark. The default access specifier is the private when we not specify that. And then in this public block we're gonna have a default constructor, and let's say marks, and we're gonna initialize this internal mark and external mark to a value of 0. So it's gonna be int mark equal to 0 and ext mark, and it's gonna be equal to 0. Alright, now next we're gonna build another constructor which is gonna take the values and it's gonna initialize these two members. So I'm gonna copy this and I'm gonna paste it here in the next line, and this constructor is gonna take two parameters. So it's gonna be int im internal mark and int em or external mark. So here we're gonna store the internal mark and then the external mark. So it's gonna be internal mark equal to im and external mark equal to em. Alright, now we have a class called marks, and then we have two members called internal mark and external mark, and we have two constructors. One is a default constructor, which is gonna initialize these two members to a value of 0, and we have another constructor which is gonna take the values and store that values in this class members. And the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna build a method which is gonna display the values. So let's call it as display, and here we're just gonna use the cout statement. So it's gonna be cout, and it's gonna be int mark, and let's end this line, and in the next line we're gonna print the the external mark, and let's end this line. All right, now we have a class, and the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna overload the plus operator. So to overload the plus operator in our program, we need to use the operator method, or the method which contains the code that should be executed when we overload the operator. So here, to define the operator method or the operator function, we need to write the return type. So in this case, what we're gonna do is we're gonna create two objects from this class marks, and let's say m1 and m2, and we need to pass the values. Let's say 10 and 20 for this m1, and for this m2 we're gonna pass 30, 40. All right, so in this tutorial what we want to do is we want to overload the plus operator, and we want to make it to work with this m1 and m2 objects, and we're gonna make marks m3 and equal to m1 plus m2. To make this one, this plus operator should be overloaded, and this operator should return an object of type marks. And that's why in this case the return type of our operator function is gonna be an object of type marks, and that's why it's gonna be marks. And then the keyword operator, and then which operator you want to overload, you have to specify that, which is plus in this case, and then a pair of parentheses, and then we need to specify the parameters taken by this operator. Here we're gonna say it's gonna take parameters of type marks, the same class, and let's say m. Next we need to define this operator function or this operator method body. So here, this method is gonna return an object of this class marks. That's why let's create a temporary object, and let's say marks temp. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna set the values to the members internal mark and external mark for this object temp. So it's gonna be temp dot internal mark equal to, what we want is we want to store the mark of the current object, which is internal mark, plus the mark of this past object, which is m dot internal mark. And then we want to store the external marks also. That's why it's going to be temp dot external mark equal to the external mark, or the value stored in this external mark of this the current object, which is ext mark, plus m dot ext mark. All right, then we're gonna return this temp, so it's gonna be return temp. All right, now we have overloaded this plus operator, and now this plus operator can take two objects of the class marks, and here it's gonna return m1 plus m2, and that will be stored in this m3. So just to demonstrate that, I'm gonna call the display method from this object m3. So it's gonna be m3 dot display. So now I'm gonna save this, I'm gonna build and run this program. Alright, now you guys can see we got 40 and 60. This 40 is the internal mark and this 60 is the external marks. That's because 10 plus 30, this 10 plus 30, which is the internal mark of m1 plus m2, is equal to 40, which is the internal mark of this m3, and then 20 plus 40, which is the external mark of this m1 and m2, which is equal to 60, which is the external mark of the m3. So here this operator overloading is similar to overloading the functions, but here we are just making this operator to work with more objects. And here when you overload the operator, it doesn't need to return the object of this class where we are overloading. It can return any values. So here just for the demonstration purpose, we have returned an object of this class marks. And most importantly, this definition of this operator functions or the statements inside this operator function is gonna depend on your program, what type of class you are making, how you want to overload your operator to work with the class objects. So it's all depends on the type of program you are writing. So here, just for the demonstration purpose, we have built this program. And the last thing that I want you guys to teach you is, we have called this m1 plus m2 here, and here we have passed only one parameter. So when our operator function or an operator method is a member function, the first parameter will be automatically passed. So here this m1 will be automatically passed as the current object, and we're just specifying the second object here, this m. Alright, if we are writing this operator function as a friend function, at that time we need to specify the two parameters, which we're gonna learn in the upcoming tutorials. So this is it, guys. This is about the introduction to operator overloading in C++ and also how to overload the plus operator. So thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.